And we are live with Colleen Tomaszewski Cook, who is the Director of Member Communications at the National Parents Union, among other things. Also the leader of, now help me, Colleen, so that I don't get it wrong, but it's the National Coalition of Public School Options.
National Coalition for Public School Options, yes.
That's right, okay.
You were close on the Tomaszewski.
Tomaszewski.
Tomaszewski, yes.
Okay. Colleen Tomaszewski Cook. All right.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. So good to be here with you on Monday.
I am I'm excited to talk to you because at the National Parents Union, you guys are doing great things. There's recently been a bunch of grants that you guys gave out directly to parents, which is near and dear to my own heart, because at this time right now, when we're talking so much about what parents are having to do to struggle to get their kids an education, I keep going back to the same thing. Resources are important. So yeah. Like, you know, people who are getting resources directly to parents that need it right now are my kings and queens right now. I wanted to put this up because over the weekend I wrote something about the media spreading fear about pandemic pods and about, oh my God, the parents are coming together and starting these private little pods. And so now I've seen things in the news about how it's going to make sure that it's going to ensure that kids aren't as safe as they were before. And there's going to be an uptick in abuse of kids, and the government needs to regulate it. I saw something over the weekend that in Massachusetts, they're actually regulating it. They're actually looking at regulating how the pods can go and everything. My point in this piece that I wrote over the weekend was that we keep talking about these pods as if they're a white thing, like as if it's just a bunch of white affluent parents. So of course, the very first thing we do when that comes about, like when we think, oh, you know, this is going to cause gaps, the affluent are going to do better, is that we ignore that there are people of color already looking to do this work and have been doing things like it already. And I do want to say, just to kind of push back on my own self, there was a story that just came out in the New York Times called "Parents Join Forces to Rethink Back to the School." And on it, there's a picture of a Black family who's doing a home pod and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, see, there you go. We just wanted some representation that we actually exist in the world. But tell me about these grants that you all gave out. The National Parents Union gave out grants to parents.
Yes. So we had over 300 applications for these grants and only had, you know, enough money to give out 13. So it is just amazing to know that so many people want to do something different and need the resources to do something different, which just means that we need to do this again, right? We need to get more people hosting grants and whatnot. But we were able to give out 13 grants ranging from, I think, $7,000 to $25,000 to help these families. And reading some of the recipients' stories, it's just amazing the work that these people, and it's individuals or small grassroots organizations, that they're getting ready to do in their communities and to serve the families who really need it most. From, you know, feeding them and offering internet, offering safe spaces, and making sure the kids are taken care of after they complete their work and things like that, and just getting more racially focused curriculum so that kids can identify a little bit better with what they're learning. And it's just amazing. I applaud Carrie, and she'll probably not like to take all that, but she really goes out and she hustles, and she really is focused on doing right by families and doing good for families and really getting families the resources that they need. And she is just, you know, I think it was over $27,000 is what it ended, or $227, I think, $1,000 is what it ended up being that we gave out. So it was amazing to be able to do that. I was excited.
You know, what kind of things did you see in the applications with the people that were applying? Like, what's the story? What kind of stories were they giving?
Oh my goodness. Well, just, gosh, I was reading some of them. You know, ISIS fan, right? Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, her kindergarten, she just teaches and really wants these kids to get a really strong foundation and strong start in education. And she was one of the recipients, and hearing her stories. And I tried to highlight a few of them. There's a homeschool pod in Madison, Wisconsin. And, being a Wisconsinite, that one kind of stuck out for me. But it will support and empower Black girls in grades 4 through 8.
Mm-hmm.
That one, I think was, it struck a little bit of a chord with me. We were talking a little bit about having daughters, and what that means and how it's a little different. And to see that this group just really wanted to take that age group that are so young and impressionable and really empower them as young Black girls and give them the support that they need and the guidance, and help them explore safely and healthy.
I think that's amazing. Just in people like Isis Span, have known her for a while. She's an educator. She's also like a grassroots educator, and she has something to say. And typically she wouldn't be the recipient of a grant for people to trust that she could go out and do something for her own community that is educational, like replacing for school, because we put all of our trust in traditional schools, traditional districts, and it's almost like, what would we do without them? And all of a sudden we have the situation now where a lot of people are having to figure out what we would do without them. And I haven't seen any other, besides the National Parents Union, I haven't seen any other of these direct grants to people like Isis to be able to do it. I think that's amazing.
When Carrie talked to me about it, I was just so excited, because I know that it will change the families who are able to be a part of these pods and receive some of the blessings from these grants. I know it will forever change their lives. But it will change the face of education as well, which you and I both know in the work that we've done, that it kind of needs to be changed up a little bit. And, teachers like Isis, I watch her stuff all the time. And I think I've learned more about fractions from Isis than I've ever learned in all of my schooling, just because she makes it fun. And she teaches it from a different angle, and she really connects with the kids. And I think we need more of that, but it's not traditional, right? It's not what we expect from a classroom situation. And now she's able to get out and help families and help these kindergartners and the pre-K there really get into a good, solid foundation in education. And it's exciting for me to be a part of it. You and I met again down in New Orleans, and at the first convening of the National Parents Union Parent Power 2020. And it was just amazing to be in the room with all those, grassroots activists and agitators, and just men and women doing such great work in their communities. And to be able to have a little part of being part of the organization that helped, give a little bit of funding to help them do the work where they're at is, a real blessing. It's super amazing. I wish we could do it. I wish that could be our only focus, right? Is just to get more money and just keep doing it. Just keep like Robin Hooding, right? Just
yeah. I believe a lot of people wish it could be your only focus.
it would be great, and I just think it's amazing. And the money's out, there's money out there, right?
Yeah.
We know there's a lot of organizations that have money that could really invest in their communities, because it's really you give a little bit, a $25,000 grant. For some, it's so much money, right? But for some, it's like, oh yeah, we can stroke a check for that, and they could invest in their community and the children, and just really see the change that a lot of people complain about not happening in their communities. So it's I hope we encourage others to do it.
I know that you guys in your other role, in your other hat, had a hashtag called I Trust Parents, right? And this is how I became aware of some of the work your other organization is doing, because I started retweeting that hashtag because I thought it's straight up. It's kind of my mission. It's my business plan. In a lot of ways, I trust parents. So if you start with that, it kind of changes the way that you look at policy. In what you're doing now, I think the question arises pretty quickly for folks whether or not they trust parents when you give them money like this. So when I talk about raising money for something like this, one of the first things you're probably going to hear is, well, how do we know that they'll use it the right way? Maybe we should find ways to provide them with some technical assistance so that they don't mess it up. What are your thoughts about getting over that uneasiness that people have with trusting that parents will do the right thing with the money?
Well, first, I just want to kind of say we give a system an incredible amount of money and we trust them with an incredible amount of money and we don't see the return. So always. So, we need to keep that in mind when we're talking about giving parents just a little bit of that money and trusting that they'll do it. For this grant, they had to write out what their intentions were, how they plan to spend the money. And, we plan to follow up and share their stories and share their successes. And I think, the proof will be in the pudding, really, when it all comes out. We'll see what they do. If I give somebody $5,000 and they can invest it and come out better than when you give a system, 10 times that, it's a good investment. And if it doesn't happen, you learn a lesson and you move on. But I don't think that parents set out with ill intentions. I don't think that, the parents that took the time to apply or the organizations that took the time to apply for this grant would have taken the time if their intentions were not the best for the kids. So that's just kind of how I feel. I think most people have good intentions, but we've been dumping money into a system that's been failing kids left and right, and we haven't really heard the argument. We don't hear that argument against the system.
That's such a good point too, though. I mean, it's like, it's the system that is coming for our parents. Right. They're the ones that are raising the suspicion, like, oh my God, we can't let all these parents do this. And it's funny that the system always has this ability to never have its own house looked at.
Right.
Like you can blame everybody else. Well, those schools over there are terrible. Those schools over, and you're kind of going, well, wait a second. Now you keep pointing at other places and but what about you? Right.
That's usually the first indicator of an issue, right? Is when people deflect.
Right.
That's usually when I start to go back and be like, well, what are they hiding? Like, what is their issue? What is their problem? And that's usually the case. I say we give it a shot. What can you lose at this point? These kids are losing their traditional education system. It's not stepping up in a lot of ways. It's not providing. Some kids have been out of the classroom since March and haven't had much contact with their teachers. These parents have had to step up with very few resources, very little support. And, some of them are working still and they're not able to be home. So why not give them an opportunity to make the best of this terrible situation? And if that's hiring a teacher, which some of the pods, they have these families that come together and they're going to pay a teacher, right, to teach their kids. That's amazing. I would, if I were a teacher, I'd be looking for those opportunities because, teach 5 or 6 kids and still be able to make a living and do and teach how you want to teach. That would be amazing. I
don't think people pay attention to that because that's the ultimate class size.
Right?
5.
My kids went to Catholic school when they were in Illinois. It was, we were outside of St. Louis in small little village. It wasn't even like a town. It was a village. I don't even think we had a stoplight, but we had, our public K-8 school, and it was, it left a lot to be desired. So I ended up putting our kids in the Catholic school, and I think it had 64 kids K-8. And it was a dream. It was, I think my daughter's class, she was kindergarten. I think she had 7 kids in her class. And my, other son had 5, and, they had individualized learning. They had, oh my gosh, I wish I could have taken that school back here to Oklahoma with me, because Spencer was advanced in math. And usually what would happen is he would get a lot of worksheets. Like he'd get a lot of extra work, a lot of busy work. And the nice thing is his math, he still had 5 problems, and the boy next to him still had 5 problems, but Spencer's were maybe a little more advanced. He never got that, feeling that he was being punished for being smart. He was just kind of helped along the way. And the boy, who may not have been at the same level as him, never felt bad for not being at the same level, because he had the same work as Spencer. It was just a little different. And, I 5 kids, oh, that's a dream. That was an amazing environment to be in. And when we talked about at one point, like, oh, can we not eat for a couple months and just pay a teacher or something, to come in and teach our kids? And now, the pandemic has kind of put the spotlight on changing that up, and the benefits of these smaller pods and smaller learning environments. And
do you worry at all, though, about the things that traditionally would come up in a discussion like this around achievement and monitoring, testing, assessment, that like kids are gonna that they're gonna lose ground? So next year we would look up and we'd have a whole bunch of kids that have lost ground in this. I don't want to call it an experiment, but it kind of is an experiment because it's a forced experiment. We have to do this anyways. Right. But do you fear about kids falling behind?
Well, of course I worry about kids falling behind, and not because of the pods per se, but just because we're not, I don't think we've been rethinking education enough, kind of like we in this, movement, so to speak, have really talked about, advancing through the time. I don't think we've focused enough on that to be ready for this situation. So I do think there's going to be some loss for these kids. There's kids who, have had very, very little contact with a teacher or, administration or anybody to really check in on them. And, it's sad, and they are going to lose some, learning. There's going to be learning loss, that's for sure. But
it's not going to be just because parents were in pods, because what I've heard some parents say is like, it wasn't great before.
Right. I don't think it's going to be because of the lack of parental involvement or support or desire to do right by their kids. I think it's just going to kind of be a reflection of where we've been. I know that, and I know a lot of people, like, I believe we need testing. I believe we need to kind of see where our kids are, but I don't think we need to say that is like the only way we can measure a child's learning growth. I know in the district we were in, come January, the kids got test packets. That's all they did were these test packets. And, my daughter was in 4th or 5th grade, and I was like, oh, how was school today? And she loved science. And I said, so what'd you learn in science today? She goes, we're done learning. We're just doing test packets now. And I was like, how profound is that, right?
We're done learning. We're done learning. Yeah, wow.
We're just doing test packets now. And that was like, those were her words. Yeah. That is what she said. And I thought, boy, girl, you got it so right. You are done learning. Now it's all test prep. It was like you had to do the packets every night. They had to do X amount of questions in the test packets. That's not learning. That's
we used to get a lot of those worksheets and everything home. I don't think we did as much. Our school district where my kids are, I don't think we did as much test prep as I hear other people do. But there were an awful lot of worksheets and what felt like make work. And then when they shifted to online because of COVID at the end of last year, they didn't really switch to distance learning. They just put those worksheets online. Right. So our kids were hating life. They were just having to do like make work stuff online. Do you feel like parents are going to have a learning curve, like a steep learning curve on which products to use, which programs to use, whether or not to choose the district's online learning versus some other program? It just feels like there's so much out there to go through.
Right. Well, and that's why we have resources like we've all been sharing, right? We've been trying to get the word out that one, what happened last March was not that was crisis learning. Like
Mhm,
kids have been in
mhm.
crisis learning mode since March. And that is not traditional online learning. That is not traditional homeschooling. That is a bunch of stuff being thrown at you and really just checking the blocks and
Mhm.
getting it done. Um, I think that my goal is to offer the knowledge that I have and the resources that I have and the people that we know, right? Like we have contact with a lot of different people in this system, from traditional to Montessori to unschooling, um, to share those resources and get those available to families. I think that when it comes to the distance learning, the online learning, I'm a little partial to letting the professionals do the work.
Mhm,
Those
mhm,
people who are,
mhm,
because it is very different. You can't just take your curriculum and put it online, like you said.
mhm.
That is not online learning. That is taking what you have and putting it online.
Yeah,
It's
that's putting bad teaching on the internet. That's the
I
difference. It's like we were bad teachers in person, so now we're going to take our bad teaching in person and put
right.
it online.
These online teachers have hours and hours on end of professional development geared specifically towards online learning and reaching that student through the computer screen, right? Which
Mhm, mhm,
is not an
mhm,
easy task. I,
mhm,
I started this whole journey back in 2012, I think it was, when my son needed something different. And he, teachers would always say, he's the model student, right? He doesn't speak, he doesn't do this. And I didn't always think that that was like the model student. I want my kid to engage. I want him to do that. And when he went into the online world, he had one teacher. Oh, she was amazing. She just, Miss Jonkowski, I just love her. She is
mhm, mhm.
science, like science is her thing, right? And she was able to reach those kids and, just kind of reach through that computer screen and capture them and bring them into her virtual classroom. That's
Mhm.
like that just isn't something that you turn on your computer and you can do. That is something that you work at. That is something that you master. That is something that you learn skills to do. And I think that's the difference between putting traditional school online and these online teachers teaching in the online environment. And um,
Teachers
that's
who've
just
been trained to do it, teachers who have experience at doing
yeah.
it. I don't know if you
And,
can remember, there used to be, I don't know if we're the same age or not, but I'll assume that you know some things that I know from experience in life or whatnot. But before my time, there used to be these movies that they used to show you to scare you straight, educational films. And one of them was like Reefer Madness type movies, like, you smoke a little bit of pot and you go crazy and you start like robbing banks and stuff like that. And then there was a couple about bad driving and there were a couple that were like Rebel Without a Cause. He's a juvenile delinquent, so he goes to jail. We used to see these terrible movies. And it was like education was about scaring the hell out of people. I only bring this up because Reefer Madness always sticks in my mind as a great example of what educators do to scare the public into one behavior or another. And right now, this narrative around be afraid of parents doing
yeah,
their own thing is starting up a little bit. And I think it's going to get bigger. I think the more parents that actually have any success doing this, there's going to be more of a need to kind of, I don't know to criticize them and make it a public narrative. Do you have any thoughts around what parents are going to do to combat that, I don't know what they would do, but to collect in some sort of way?
I just, I'm all about the parent voice being heard and just doing what you do and it, just showing up and doing it. Just do it. You know, they're going to do the scaring and the back talking. I mean, I know that when I made the decision that I made for my child, I mean, I had people get upset with me. I had friends like tell me I was just like this awful person and I'm ruining his life and all this and that. I got to do what's best for my kid. Because at the end of the day, these same people who are saying those things aren't stepping up and doing the best thing for my kid. And if they really, really cared that much, they would be busting their chops to make sure that these kids had access to every single thing that they need.
I wonder what it's like for a person to, I hear you say that and I think to myself, oh, hell no. I wonder what it's like for a person to look you directly in the face and say that they think a choice that you're making for your kid in education makes you a bad person. How do you even get to the point in life where you can open your mouth and say something like that?
Well, sometimes they just believe the hype. It's kind of right now our old school district, we just moved to a much smaller school district. And our old school district, started putting online like, just remember that when we're doing the best that we can. And if you take your child out of school, pretty soon our school won't be funded. So like, I'm sure it serves a need, but if you're funded to only serve, 2,000 kids that are in your high school, that's all you should be funded for. You shouldn't be funded I should not feel bad to keep my kid in something that's not working. You guys they're failing the families right now. They're failing families, and families, these kids don't have a year to wait to see what happens. Some of these kids are seniors going out into the, college or work world next. They don't have that time. So parents we should not be guilted into staying somewhere just to see it through. It's just like when you think about it in a business way, would you really just let your money continue to go to a business that you're, one, not getting anything from, and two, is failing you? You would be like, oh, heck no. Like, that's my money.
In some ways, that's a terrible situation too, for a district to tell you that if you do something that's best for your family, you're somehow robbing them. That shows the extent to which they think that education really is about them. Yeah. It's like really about their system. If you told me, if you stop going to your local library and keep going out to the suburbs and going to that library, our library might close, I might consider it, because a library is open to all, and I get to use it how I wish to use it. So if you told me to bypass my local library, I would be defunding it. I would think seriously about that. See, the problem becomes when it becomes about my kid, though. When you're telling me I need to keep my kid in an abusive relationship, in a relationship with the building that doesn't love them like I love them, will accept failure on their behalf. Like, just accept it. Like, I love it when people will accept your kid's failure, but they won't, they would never do that for their own.
Exactly. And, I sometimes have equated this school family relationship to a really bad marriage, right? To an abusive marriage that, well, they don't mean to hurt you, but they are, and they're not listening to your needs.
And they do it because they love you.
Yeah.
They do it because they love you. Yeah.
And I think, for me, sitting there, when I made this decision for my son, the counselor literally told me that she loved my kid starting off, right? And then as she's giving me the options, of the alternative school. Now, my kid was like 97 pounds. He was not going to survive in the alternative school. He just wasn't. Like, he wasn't a bad kid. He was just struggling. And I'm thinking, like, you don't love my kid. You probably forgot his name if you're not looking at his file. Like, you don't know my child. You don't know what he needs. You're sitting here telling a parent who is like just wanting to do the very best for my kid. If he lost a year of learning, I don't care. I really like, and gosh, that clip might get taken out of context, but I want my kid here. I want him to be healthy and whole. So 1 year of learning to make that happen, like, I'm not going to be guilted into staying into your district because he's going to get your diploma. Nobody cares. Like, at the end of the day, nobody cares. Nobody cares where you got your high school diploma from. They really don't. I mean, my kids don't even know where their diplomas are. They just don't. It's not an issue. So to put that on me as I'm struggling to make this decision for my child and struggling to just wrap my head around what's going on with my child, that was like a switch had been flipped, right? And it was like not good for the other person on the other side of the desk. It just wasn't, I was like, not today. This is my kid and I got to do what's best for him. And And I think that parents now are seeing that more and more. They're being told one thing, but they're seeing that their kids, I like the meme, like, your kid hasn't had a stomach ache once since this pandemic, right? How many parents have acknowledged that about their child, that they haven't not wanted to get up that day? They haven't, how many, we have all these absences and all these, kids being sick, and, is it because they don't want to go to the environment that we're sending them? And I think parents are starting to wake up a little bit more as to what their kids want and what their kids need and how their kids' needs are being met. And, I am grateful. I just kind of worry that we don't have, that there's kids whose parents want these things and they just don't have the resources to provide these things. And that's kind of like my concern, because I think all parents just really want the best for their kids. And if we can, get more grants out there to get these kids the resources that they need, I think it's a game changer for the future. I think we'll change kids' lives. And I think that those parents in those areas will feel empowered to go back and demand better, and demand more. I just see it as this big circle, right, of doing the right thing. And, we've learned from Virginia, Walden Ford, that these schools have been underserving kids for a long, long time. And, in the pandemic, it's even worse.
I think one thing that we might learn about parents, especially when we think about middle-class parents and lower income parents, is the different levels of responsibility that they feel for their kids. And it's probably the flip of what most people would think I'm about to say. I believe that a lot of parents are going to wake up to the fact that they were always responsible for doing more than bringing their kids to school. And I think a lot of middle-class families, this is just me kind of putting it out there, kind of what I think a lot of middle-class families had a number of children with predicated on the premise that they weren't going to have to be with them all day long, every day, right? Like, so we're going to have 3 kids because we know for sure for 6 to 8 hours a day, they're not going to be with us. Whereas if they would have known that they were going to be with them all day, they may have had 1, right? Like, and when you think about that, you think about the fact that there is a level of responsibility that I don't think that every parent was ready for in the middle class. And those people, because they're very politically active, are going to be pushing more than anybody for regular school to return, to get everybody back into regular school, while other parents are out here experimenting with new things and trying, like, one group of parents are probably figuring out, wow, my kid is much happier at home. And all this stuff about socialization, maybe the schools aren't the best socializers that we thought they were, because I know in my case, my kids are much more manageable now that they're not going to the wild, wild west of some of these, daytime Lord of the Rings jungle thing that they go to or whatever. No, Lord of the Flies. That's what I always call schools. Like, I feel like our kids are walking into something adults don't know at all what's going on about. They're experiencing things in the social interactions. So I think on one side, you have parents that are experiencing for the first time, I'm learning more about my kid. I seem to know, like, some of the stuff I thought before isn't real. They seem to be happier. They get to sleep in and they get to wake up when they want to wake up, or when I wake them up, and that makes them more manageable in the morning. No, I'm not saying it's all roses and whatever, because you got things like Xbox and too many Pop-Tarts and stuff like that, right? So let's just be real. But that other set of parents, though, who really depend on the district schools so that they can just go to work and have careers and be the 2-parent family that, has it all, they're probably going to be pushing for back to school.
Great. Knock yourself out. Go back to school.
You're like, fine with it.
And I think that's great. Send them back. If that's what they want, that should be a choice. But let's give the other parents who don't want that an option. And, if that means that, the money follows the child, or we set up resources within our districts to accommodate some of this distance learning, in a different view, let it happen. I mean, those parents, and I've seen them, I kind of like having, gosh, I hope she doesn't see this. I kind of like having my kid at home. She, we have a lot of fun, and she's 16 and she's a teenage female, and it's kind of crazy sometimes, but I enjoy having her home. I like having her around, and, you mentioned the socialization, and as a family who did online, I don't know that we heard it as much as the traditional homeschoolers, but that's all you hear is, what about socialization? I'm like, have you seen some of these animals? Like, I don't want my kids sitting with that kid.
I mean, seriously. Yeah. And we're not supposed to say that. Like, just be real. Like, we're not supposed to say that. But as long as I've been saying, I don't think we're all meant to go to school together. I don't believe in the common school. I believe, you self-select into environments that are more like you. And this thing about socialization, we do not pay attention to the amount of bullying and ostracization and, kind of like cliquishness and the really foul stuff that happens during the day because we've put too many different kinds of people together who self-organize into really kind of, problematic groups.
Yeah, sometimes the teachers are a huge part of that.
Absolutely.
Well. And, I've had that discussion, and I'm sure they're great people, but as teachers in a classroom, I don't think they always recognize, to be inclusive of all children, someone had told me once, like, the strongest personality in the classroom will influence the entire classroom. And so when you get in that classroom, look for the strongest personality. And that is where your kid is going to get their socialization, is from that personality. And some days it's like, that's scary, and it's not what you want your kid. And some kids just aren't meant to be that social, and it's okay. Like, when we grow up, and this is something I tell my kids all the time, like, post high school, nobody cares. Like, nobody cares. Like, this is just a blip on the radar, and we invest so much into making it this grand life event and not focus on the actual education of the children. Like, it's this big life event, the best time of your life, the school years. I mean, we've made TV shows just about that. And, it's just become branded that it has to be like this, right? You have to have the Letterman's jacket. You have to have this. You have to do that. You have to go to your local public school. And you know what? You don't. You can be just as successful and just as happy doing your own thing. And I think that's one thing that this pandemic, like, there's been a lot of good things that have come out of this pandemic. One, like, I don't like shopping as much as I thought I did. I'm just going to say, like, I like staying at home. And my daughter likes being at home. And I've also learned that you can be educated in educating your child in many different ways. And there's this author that I've reached out to. She's a teacher here, and she wrote a book. It's actually just printed out, and I'm trying to get her to come talk to me, right? Because it's all about the different ways you've been learning already. Like, you don't have to be in the classroom to learn. You don't have to be in the classroom to learn. And this is a teacher putting that out there to put her children at ease because they're not in the classroom learning. And she kind of broke the mold of that public school mindset. When I heard her read this book, it's just amazing because she was more focused on their well-being and them understanding that learning doesn't have to be at a desk for 50 minutes at a time, writing this, that, and the other, taking notes. Learning can be baking a cake with your mom or doing this or doing that, making those critical decisions. And I think that is one of the great things that has come out of this whole pandemic, is that parents and children and some educators are really understanding that learning does not have to take place in a box.
Not only does it not have to, that it may not be optimal. Like, this is the thing that I think parents are going to have to ask themselves that maybe they never asked before. Okay, if I'm going to have to pick something, what's the best? What's the most optimal I can do for my kid based on what I know about my kid? That's a lot different than saying, which building am I going to have to put them on depending on my address, first of all.
Right.
That's like a whole different mindset. I know here locally, like what we're learning, this is I always care about what people of color and families of color and traditionally, historically marginalized families are going to figure out in any of these situations, because I'm interested in this group of people moving forward. And I think education is one of the ways there. I know here in my district, the Somali students actually in my district actually had a federal case against the school district for systemic discrimination. So let me tell you like some of the stuff that was going on. So we had Somali girls being chased by white boys who would chase them, knock them down, and rub bacon on their heads. And they thought it was funny. It was a game. It was a game to like knock down the Muslim girls and bring bacon to school to rub on them. We had a couple of teachers that were actually handing out air freshener to students to spray the air freshener on them as they would walk by out of classrooms or whatnot. We had a federal case that came and investigated this. The school district had to form a settlement. So when I say that we're not all meant to go to school together, this is what happened in that situation. The principals sat those girls down and some of their families and said, these kids don't mean anything by this. If you want to be American and you want to like fit in, you're going to have to like grow a thick skin and stop making too much of these things. And, you know, these are just good kids doing good kids things, you know, that whole scenario. And that is one of my stories around, we don't all need to go to school together, because if you rub bacon on my Muslim daughter's head, now I'm going to be the bad guy when I kick your ass. Right.
I'm thinking, right. Like,
yeah. So, I mean, like, that's systemic, though. That wasn't the only group like that. That wasn't the only suit. Other suits kept coming up after that. And what they kept being told was, you know, this is just kids being kids. And at some point, like my daughter had a couple of interactions, which I'm not going to go too much into. And I had one son that had a few interactions that I'm not going to go into, where I didn't give a damn what was going on in the life of the other person, the other kid, that other family. I was not trying to understand anything about them, whatever. All I was saying was, I care about my kid, damn it. And if I can't be safe in bringing my kid to your school and you can't stop them from encountering some things I don't want them to encounter, then no, we're not meant to go to school together. Right. Yeah. And I don't have like a favorable opinion of those other kids. I don't know what goes wrong in somebody's life that they're rubbing bacon on a person's head when they know that that's deeply offensive, but I really don't care what's going on in their life that makes them do that. What I care about is my kid.
Right. Well, yeah, that's too much. That's awful. Like it's one of those things of where we've gone wrong. And and I think the last time I was on the show, it's just about being a good human. Like, why would you do something so cruel to another human? Like, regardless, it's just, I don't know. There's something wrong. And then we justify it. You know, by kids being kids, or they don't mean any harm, or they come from good families, or whatever. It's BS. Kids don't need to be in that environment, and we need to pay attention. And I think this has really opened up those discussions a little bit more about how we can make those changes and how we can make sure that, you know, children, like I would be, I don't know, I would have come unglued. Somebody would have been hurt. it just
right.
like wouldn't have been good. But you know, what can we do to set up a safe environment for those children? Not the ones who were the offenders, but those who were terribly offended. Like, they need a safe space to go to school. They're not learning when that's happening, and those teachers aren't going to make sure it's going to happen because they're part of the problem. And hopefully, now that we have our eyes opened a little bit, we can start to make those changes where we need to. We need to, you know, make sure that those who are in those situations or in the communities where, you know, we've largely ignored because it hasn't affected us, you know, that we serve them. Like, how can we serve them? Do I need to give you a MiFi? Like, you know, because one thing can change this. Let's think of alternatives. Let's get in there and do some work. And, you know, I kind of go back to those 300 plus applications. Those are people who want to serve in those particular communities. Just 300. And I don't think that the window for the applications was like, had we left it open for another week or two, it probably would have tripled the amount of applications. And that's just, in our circle, right? Of people who want to make changes in those areas that are underserved and those areas that, have those specific needs. And we need to start focusing and changing how we approach the work that we do so that we make sure that those communities get what they need. Because
but I think it's like, these small grants are important as a start and to show people it can be done.
Yeah.
It would be great if philanthropy started to go big on this idea. And, philanthropy is given a lot of money to other parts of, educational advocacy or whatnot. It'd be great if they put more of their money where their mouth is and get it directly to parents and make this a bigger effort. And even a level up from that, it would be great if we eventually got to the part where the money that the government sets aside for your per pupil allotment was in your control. Right? Like a 401k, like this is your money, this is your portfolio. What are you going to do? You've got 3 kids. Here's the amount of money that you have to work with. Which educational providers do you want to put it into? Right? That would be the mega level of really trusting parents is by giving them control over that per pupil. But the political fight to make that happen.
Right.
Parents don't have a chance.
Right. So that's where we as communities and we as just good people just need to step up and help boost that so we can show that parents can be trusted and parents can make good decisions. Reading some of these grant proposals and it's just amazing what people are making, like $25,000, how they're stretching it. Their focus truly is on the safe and healthy education of their kids.
That's such a good point, that poor people do know what to do with money to make it go further.
They do.
We might learn something about education if you give $25K to this person, they can do way more than another person would do with that same money. Yeah. Wow.
I mean, I don't know how you grew up, but there were times in our family that, $5 was like, they had to go a long way. And, my mom could make it stretch. And just kind of, just because they're poor doesn't mean that they're stupid or that they're not worth as much as a human as anybody else. And I think we need to kind of step back and remember that, sometimes circumstances in life put people where they're at. And we shouldn't judge. That's not our place to judge. It's our place to figure out if you've been blessed, and that's really like at the end of the day, yeah, some of it's hustle, some of it's hard work, and some of it's, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps or whatever. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to you've been blessed, 1, to be born in this country, and 2, to have the opportunities ahead of you that you've had, or to have a mentor in your life that helped you make a decision that you otherwise wouldn't have made because of your circumstances, right? It comes down to that. And in return, we need to go back to those who maybe were in the same situation that we're in and bless them, because we're in a position to do that. And that's just kind of how I see where we're at, my family, Dad and I, and my boys. And, we've been blessed. We've had a lot of bad things happen in our life, but we've also been very blessed, and we need to give back. And I think in our communities, we need to start thinking like that. Our kids are all suffering because of this whole pandemic, all of them. So we need to stop and take a look around, like, who doesn't have what my kids have? Who doesn't have that? And what can I do to just give a little bit? Like, change
I
that.
love this point. I mean, this is a big point for middle class people listening. I've spent the last 3 or 4 years of my life. I started a foundation a few years ago, and the pitch of that foundation was everybody can be a philanthropist. Like, you don't have to sit around and wait for Bill Gates and other people to drop dollars on people, because you have enough. You can be blessing people left and right if you want to. There are little things you can do, like tipping your servers 100% during this time right now. Making sure that if there are families near you, that it's not going to kill you to buy 1 or 2 or 3 Chromebooks for a family, or to make sure that you drop some groceries or whatever. This is all stuff. Philanthropy could be part of your normal walk in life as middle class people. And when it comes to this education situation we're in right now, this is why I love the pods, is because it's also people who, word of mouth is one of the best ways that resources travel. Like, when people look for schools, word of mouth is very powerful about schools. A program, or like an online program, someone will tell you, oh no, we did that one for 6 months. It was horrible, blah, blah, whatever. So networking, word of mouth, sharing. This has to be a sharing time amongst parents. But I want to go back to this point that you just made too, that I think is one of the strongest selling points for trusting parents, which is, if you are used to actually having to make a little bit stretch a lot, if you are used to having to make sure that your kids get shoes and that you have enough food and that the rent gets paid and all those things with too few resources, if someone gives you $25,000, it's different than giving a person who's worth, like a budget of 100K every year, whatnot. And they don't see that as like a lot to do with. So this idea of getting these grants directly to parents that are already used to having to make things stretch might teach us some things about what parents do. Because I know a lot of those parents, having worked with in social services, a lot of the parents that I see in that situation know which program is going to be up for the summer. They know which Y to go to. They know which program is going to do A, B, C, and D, because they're constantly having to put together what they can. Right. So if you give them a little bit of money, it actually helps them stretch. It makes me think of, I always have weird analogies, Colleen. So here's my weird analogy. I remember so little from my school years, but I do remember in home ec. And yes, I took home ec, and yes, I really liked home ec. It was one of my favorite classes because you got to eat in the class, right? But I can remember we had this assignment once, and this was at a school that was kind of economically mixed. And we had an assignment once. You had to bring $10 in, and there was a grocery store 3 or 4 blocks down the street, and everybody walked to the grocery store. Your assignment was to bring back, to make a meal that could feed the biggest number of people with just $10, right? So it was about calories and how many could you like really feed into a normal portion. And the poor kids won that damn contest, like hands down, just won that. That was one where the rich kids went in there and came back with like a rotisserie chicken or some crap like that, or something. And the other folks came back with rice and beans and grits and cornmeal and all kinds of other stuff that could expand and fill a stomach. And I think that could say a lot about, in a time like this, who we give the money to. Mm-hmm. They can probably expand a lot more on. The district wastes a ton of money right now. Districts waste a ton of money. You said it earlier in this conversation. We give them a ton of money and we don't even ever ask about the return on investment.
I remember I go to parent teacher conference every time they come up. That's my thing. I encourage every parent to go to their parent teacher conferences. And if they run out of slots, make an appointment. It is important to have that face-to-face time. But I sat and talked with my son's English teacher. And she was a younger teacher, but she was really frustrated because, we just kind of started talking about some of the stories that they're reading and different things. And she's like, well, I have these textbooks on my shelf that I didn't want. All I asked for were, X amount of copies of this book and this book. But I had to get these textbooks. They haven't been opened in 2 years. They've never been opened, but they cost. And she's telling me this. And I'm like, that's just like, my God, like, what are we doing? We are so wasteful. And and this is from a district who has a lot of money, but still doesn't have enough money. And I'm like, you got textbooks sitting on shelves that you forced a teacher to purchase that have not been opened in 2 years. Like,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
would never see a poor district or poor parents doing that just because they had to spend that money and get it out to for whatever reason. All she was asking for were a couple copies of books that she could lend her students, and instead she got textbooks that she couldn't use. So she had to go find the resources to get the actual books that she needed, while these extremely expensive textbooks sat unopened on her shelf and that she was forced to have. It's just, I think
We don't ever really ask the questions about what they do with their money. We really don't get
we
deep
don't.
into it. We just say they need more money. We just
And
constantly say they need more money.
if you ask that question, it becomes this battle. And I appreciate teachers. I have loved many of my children's teachers. Now, there
Mhm.
are some that have been less than desirable and probably shouldn't be in the profession. And I think that even other educators would say that about educators. There are
Mhm.
just some who just don't need to be in the profession, or it's just time for them to move on. If you say anything at all about finances, or, come into question about where the money's being spent, or why, what happens is you get, labeled as, anti-public ed and anti-teacher, and it's a hate fest on you, when that's not what you're asking. I'm just asking, like, why are we building a softball locker room when we still have, 10 trailers out here with holes in the floors? Like, first off, like, what's our priority?
I'm
Well,
asking myself stuff like, why are poor people bringing Kleenex to school on the first day? Why are poor people bringing Kleenex, hand sanitizer, Clorox wipes, this list of things with their kids on the first day? And you're shamed if you don't in a lot of places. I'm not going to say this is everybody's situation, but in some places you're shamed if you don't bring it. I can name one place where I grew up, and I'm not going to name it actually, where it was routine for many parents to keep their kids out of school for the first week or two because they couldn't bring the list of things to school that they needed. And you have to ask yourself, what is going on with all that damn money that you need parents to be bringing you Kleenex to school and toilet paper in some cases.
oh, yeah, we had that when you're here. And, the thing is that I think what happens is they start to see what parents are willing to do, and they just let it happen. Like, okay, well, if parents are willing to bring in toilet paper, let's let them bring in toilet paper, and divert the funds to somewhere else. It's not like they're really, like, they still get the same amount of money, but now parents are picking up the tab for a lot of the resources.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have an accounting of, like, okay, you're not buying toilet paper, you're not buying Kleenex, you're not buying copy paper, you're not doing this. So where are those resources going? And, we can't ask those questions because who's going to answer them?
Anti-ed. You're being so anti-education,
Oh,
Colleen.
I was actually told that I hate public schools.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible soundbite, but and I'm like, I'm president of the National Coalition for Public School Options. Like, if you fit in your neighborhood brick and mortar school, thank God. Like, thank God that you have that option that your taxes are already paying for.
Yeah.
But if you don't, it is our responsibility, my responsibility, as part of, in advocacy, and just mainly because I think all kids deserve, like, they have the right to a quality education.
Mm-hmm. I think parents need to just grow their power. Parents, because, like, I'm sick of the, you hate public ed or you hate this or whatnot. Listen, your public schools are not my Jesus, right? So I'm not going to, like, genuflect and act like, I'm not going to, like, do the sign of the cross every time I talk about teachers. I'm not going to, like, do that when I talk about funding for schools or whatnot. Those are government institutions. You're not going to make me feel as though the best human I can be in life is to treat those like they're temples and like the unions are God. Because I'm sorry, but I'm a Christian. We're not going to go for that. So let's back up from that. But in the end here, because we're wrapping on time, I want to ask you, like, what's your final word to parents around what we've been talking about today around, like, getting resources directly to parents exercising their power and the potential during this pod experiment. What's your final word to parents to keep pushing forward? Just
keep doing what's best for your kids. Seek out in your community the the resources, look for the people who are doing the work, because they're the ones who will get you connected with what you need to do the work that you need to do as a parent. Because there's lots of people, lots of just everyday people out there doing this work. And they're usually in your community centers. They're usually out in the community. They're doing those things, and don't hesitate to ask. Don't hesitate to ask for help when it comes to the education of your child. There's lots of people willing to help.
Well, I love it. Colleen, thank you for joining this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Chris. It's always a treat to sit and talk with you. You're a really great human.
Well, you're one of my heroes in this work, because I trust parents. And not only do I trust parents, I think everybody who does needs to unite. We need to come together and just be like, damn it, we are coming together for parents. I don't care what background you come from. I don't care what your situation is. We're not going to be pushed around anymore. And I really appreciate you guys giving out these grants, and hopefully more come.
I'm hoping I am hoping that we continue to get funding for these grants, and that if anybody out there wants to consider donating, let's put it out there. Let's put it together and get some more of these grants going, because right now we have over 280, 90 people who applied just for this grant who are still
out there.
Yeah,
still need help.
And
yeah, well, I will thank you again for coming. I did put the link into the comments about both these grants and also how to get in touch with the National Parents Union. It's something that I'm pushing. I think we do need to collect power. So anybody who hears me, please join the National Parents Union and think about starting a chapter where you are. Collective power is the only way that we're going to win. I will also add what I just said a little while ago, is many of us are not seeing ourselves as the philanthropists that we can be. We don't have to wait for official systems to do things for each other. So as we know that there are people that need things, and you have things, God has blessed you in your life. Some of us have a little bit of extra. I'm looking at this like tire around my waist here that tells me that I'm not doing so bad and whatnot. So I should give some of it so that I can lose some of this a little bit. I just hope that that you don't have families in proximity to you that have needs that you could fill, but you're not seeing them. So I would just ask people, start seeing parents, start seeing each other, and let's do well by each other. Colleen, I appreciate you again. And anybody who needs information, I did put it into the comments, but you can always contact me to meet any of the guests if you want to connect with guests from this show. So thank you.